So I picked up my MWS about a year ago, and I've had a whole bunch of games that I've played with this thing so far. Absolutely love it. And I found out a few months ago that a company called Archwick was putting out a trigger unit to simulate more closely a real steel trigger system for the MWS. So with Christmas just having passed by, I decided to buy that for myself as an investment into the sport, and I finally got it. So I'm going to be putting that in, and I'm going to show you the majority of the process for that, as well as I'll be opening up the gearbox itself and showing the disassembly and the installation for that too, because the one other video that I've seen that showcases the Archwick system that wasn't made by Archwick did not open up the gearbox or the trigger box. So I figured I'd go ahead and do that for anyone who was curious and wanted to know. And since I'm taking this apart, I figured I'd also show what it is that I've been playing with for the last year, because this is not a stock MWS. It has had a handful of components changed. This is also not a Tokyo Marui. This is a Guns Modify, so it is slightly different than a Tokyo Marui might be out of the box. But for the most part, every single thing that applies to this Gun Modify MWS will also apply to a Tokyo Marui if that is what you are using. And that includes the compatibility of the trigger box by Archwick and the steel bolt by Archwick, because they do come as a set. You can't buy the trigger box on its own, but you can buy the bolt by its own. However, I'll do a comparison of a standard MWS bolt and the Archwick MWS bolt, and I'll show you why you need both to work, because the Archwick bolt does not work with a standard MWS trigger box, and I'll show all that later on in the video. So let me go ahead and start disassembling this off video, and I'll be right back as soon as that's all done. If you do need me to show you how to disassemble this in its entirety, feel free to leave a comment, and I will get around to doing that at some point if it has enough interest. Otherwise, I'm sure there's plenty of other YouTubers out there who have done this on camera, who you can find instructions from that will show you how to do this. I know there's a ton of MWS information already on YouTube, which is why I'm not going to try to tell you like, oh, this is the best setup or whatever. I'm just going to show you what's in mine, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on the Archwick, as well as show you how to open it up. Before I do go ahead and open it up, I wanted to real quickly go over all of the externals. There's really nothing special about this. You got your Atlas Custom Works QD SOCOM suppressor. This does have a 4-prong flash hider under it, so you can remove this and run it just with the flash hider if you choose so. This is a Surefire Scout flashlight. It's a repro. I got it for free, so I threw it on there because why not, even though I rarely ever use flashlights, which is apparent in my videos if you've ever seen one. Geisley Automatics Mark 16 rail. This did not come with the GM. I actually initially I bought this in the Mark 18 configuration because the Mark 16 was out of stock, so I had to buy the rail separately. It was not that expensive. It's like a $60 rail, and I bought it all at the same time, so it showed up at the same time. I do have a short on my channel somewhere where I show you exactly what it looked like pretty much right out of the box. So if you wanted to see that in the Mark 18 configuration, it's on my channel somewhere. Magpul foregrip, hand stop, I'm sorry. I'm not entirely sure what the model of this is, but it's a Magpul. I know that for sure. I bought it from a gun store. The PTS rail covers, nothing special there. Revanchist mag release, Revanchist selector switches, Magpul MOE K2, a grip, the PTS EPS C. This does come with a black Magpul CTR stock out of the box, but I wanted a tan one, and since I couldn't find someone who was willing to trade me a tan CTR for a black CTR, I just decided to put this PTS on there since I already had it. This is a Geisley Automatics charging handle. It's the ACH. Then we have the Unity mount here. This is a repro. I know some airsoft stores sell them for $50, $60. I got mine on eBay for $17. So I would recommend going that route if you're interested in getting one of this. And I am in the US, so this stuff, everything that's on mine, you can get in the US. And then the site is Novus MDS2. They do sell these in the US. I got mine on JK Army though, because it was cheaper that way and I needed to order some stuff from overseas, so I ended up ordering it from JK Army. But that's pretty much it for my externals. Again, nothing super special there. It's pretty much your run-of-the-mill URGI replica. Alright, so MWS fully disassembled, well, mostly disassembled. Disassembled as far as I need to go in order to do the trigger swap. The grip doesn't need to come off, neither does a buffer tube. You can leave all that stuff on. I did forget to mention as well, if it matters, I do have a PTS QD sling point on the back there, and this is most of what goes in my MWS. Obviously I can't have two buffer weights in there. This is just an older one that I wanted to talk about. The same goes for my hop unit here. Obviously I can have both inside of it, but this is the old one that I just pulled out of it, which will be getting swapped out for the Archwick hop unit, which is also new to me. I don't know when these parts came out, but I just received them about 2 or 3 days ago. So all of this stuff is fairly new to me. I have not yet field tested it. Unfortunately, this did come a little bit too late. I did go to MK Medina and MK Willard this last weekend right after Christmas, but these parts weren't in yet, so I wasn't able to put them in my gun and field test them when I went to MK over the weekend. But I have played with this in my garage, and I have a general idea of what the differences are between the two. I have opened this up before already as well. Like I promised, I'll do it on camera as well, so you can see what the internals look like, and then I'll do the reassembly as well. But I already have a general idea of what the main differences is between these two, so I'm gonna speak about that, and like I said, give you the knowledge of opening this up. I will not be opening up my Guns Modify trigger box. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know if there's any videos online about the trigger box being opened, but I figured the MWS system has been out long enough that there's a high possibility that there is a video on that. And since this will already be out of my gun, if somebody does need me to show that, I can very easily do a short on it or do a real quick couple-minute video to showcase that, since it's not gonna require disassembly of the gun in order to do. So on the internals of my gun, you can see I have two different weights here. This is a GNP version 2, and this is the PTS mech. The main difference between the two is that this one has weights that move and the PTS mech does not. It instead has this piece right here that is spring loaded. So they both work really well to remove bolt bounce. This is also an Angry Gun 130% spring, so a little bit heavier than what comes in the MWS stock, but I found that the spring actually helped push the bolt forward more efficiently, as well as give a little bit more recoil, which is something that most GBB enthusiasts are looking for. So either one of these weights paired with the Angry Gun 130% spring should be enough to give you some really nice recoil, even if you're not using a steel bolt. The PTS does come with these two small buffers in the box. I've been using just the thick one. For right now, it's more than enough. I don't want to short stroke it too far, but when I had the GMP installed, I did the 4/4 and the buffer tube trick, and it worked just as well. Alright, so the bolts. This is the Archwick bolt. This is my old bolt. I broke my old bolt, so I can't use it anymore. If I do ever decide to go back to the main, the standard TM trigger box, I'll have to buy a new bolt, but that is way down the line until I get some field games with the Archwick trigger box, and then I can decide which one I like better. The old bolt, I believe, is made out of zinc, so as you can see, not magnetic. The new bolt is made out of steel, picked up pretty easily by my magnet. This does not come with this roller installed. It comes with this weight. This is the weight that comes on the Archwick bolt out of the box. This is the one that came off of this bolt initially. I bought the alpha roller separately. I really like it. I feel like it definitely improves the centering of the bolt as well as the smoothness of function when you're using it. On my Archwick bolt as well, this bearing here, this was not initially here. That came with this black bead here is what initially came right here. This bearing was actually pulled off of my old bolt and thrown onto the Archwick bolt. I like it a lot better. It feels a lot smoother. So this black bead that came out of the Archwick is not going to be used at all. Now, the other person who made a video on the Archwick parts did mention that he was unsure whether or not these nozzles were going to be NPAS compatible. You can see that little tint of blue there. That is a Jaeger Precisions NPAS. The nozzle that comes in the Archwick bolt is a unicorn nozzle. There's nothing in-house, unique, special, whatever about it. It's just a regular old unicorn nozzle. If you've bought one before, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I do have spare nozzles, as you can see right here. This is a complete nozzle that is not installed, obviously. This one has a Federal Concepts Feta valve. You can see there that it's green, whereas this one is blue. The reason I have the blue one installed is because in my testing I found that the Jaeger Precisions valve was just a little bit more consistent than the Federal Concepts valve. It's also a tighter fit inside the nozzle, inside both the Unicorn and the Guns Modify V3.5 nozzle. So I decided to go with that because, it, like I said, it has tighter tolerances and it has better FPS consistency. Now, I will eventually be picking up a fourth nozzle that will also be a Guns Modify V3.5, and I'll be doing the same thing where I put a Feta valve in one and a Jaeger Precisions valve in the other one, and then do some testing there to decide, you know, what ultimately gives me the best results. And I'll likely be sharing that information with you guys as well whenever I get to that point, but that will be a little bit further down the line since I'll be going back to school here soon and I'm not going to have time to do airsoft while I am studying. For anyone who is wondering why I haven't posted any videos in a while, I am an engineering student. I'm in my 4th year now, so I have a lot of homework, I have a lot of labs, I have a lot of projects that I need to do for school. So 4-month intervals throughout the year, I'll be away from home to be doing my studies, which is again why I haven't been able to post as many videos as I used to do. Plus, since I play mostly at Black Ops Airsoft in Wisconsin, I figure it probably gets a little tiresome for you guys to see me do the exact same thing every day, or I'm sorry, every weekend for the uploads, you know. So I'm trying to do some variety. I'm looking at potentially being able to travel to other fields so I can have more diverse footage to show you guys. But that's pretty much it for the bolt and my little rant about why I haven't been posting as much lately. Alright, I turned my flashlight on for this part because it will matter here in a little bit. I'm going to touch on the hop units. So the standard MWS hop units, both the Guns Modify and the Tokyo Marui, as far as I know, use this terrible wheel design. This one is really stiff and it's really hard to turn. So I didn't like that and I opted to swap it out for something a little bit better. The old ones also have the notches on the wheel, so you're limited to how much you can adjust the hop, which I didn't like either, which is why I initially bought this PH Plus. If you're wondering what that little arrow on there that I etched into it is, that's the way to turn it to increase hop. The newer ones come with a little plus and minus etched into the hop unit already, so you know which way to turn it. I don't know why they didn't do that sooner, but they're doing it now, so I guess yay for anyone who buys a new one. And the Archwick is very similar in concept. The main differences between these two is that, as you can see there, that uses a flathead screw to adjust, whereas this uses a 2mm Allen key to adjust. But same concept, you know, they don't have those notches, so you can do fine tuning, fine adjustments for your preferred BB weight to get the best trajectory for the weight that you're using, which I absolutely love. It's the same reason why I love Max hop units or Retro Arms hop units for AEGs, because they don't have those clicky notches that set the hop to what comes from the factory, if that makes any sense. The main differences between the actual chamber itself here are really that the PH Plus has a dual O-ring to retain, to keep it shut, whereas the what's called the Archwick has a single O-ring. The nubs are also different. The PH Plus comes with 2 metal nubs. There's one in here already. I don't want to take this apart though. There's one in here, and the differences between its 2 nubs is that one is like smooth and curved like this, like smoothly curved, and the other one is like angular, so it has a like a trapezoid. Is that what they're called? Like a trapezoidal shape. Kind of hard to show without having the piece, but I don't know where it's at. It's floating around my part bin somewhere. I just don't know exactly where, but it's got angular cuts instead of being that smooth, rounded surface for it to contact the bucking. I always use the rounded surface, the rounded nub in my PH Plus, so I don't know how the other one performs, but I would recommend if you pick up a PH Plus, use the rounded nub. This one does have 2 different type of nubs. It has a plastic one and it has a metal one. The metal one is the one that is currently installed into mine. This is the plastic one. Depending on how the metal one performs when I finally get to shoot some BBs at distance, I'll decide whether I keep it in or take it out. They are both comparable in price. I want to say this one was like $80 and the PH Plus was like $70. And the only, what I would say is the difference in cost is that the PH Plus comes with their in-house bucking. This blue bucking is, I'm sorry, not the PH Plus. The Archwick comes with their in-house bucking. This blue bucking is an Archwick in-house bucking, whereas the PH Plus is just the hop unit when you get it. So I would recommend either one of these hop units because, like I said, the adjustment wheel on them, the fact that you can do minute adjustments, to me has always been a great advantage over the standard clicky type hop units. So either one should work fine. Unfortunately, like I said, I haven't been able to put BBs through this, so I can't really say like, oh my god, this thing is fantastic, highly recommend, whatever. But the PH Plus, for sure, without a doubt, fantastic, highly recommend. If you can afford it, pick one up. The only downside to the PH Plus, which I suppose the Archwick has as well right now, is that they're only available overseas. So you have to order them from either JK Army or Red Wolf or whatever other retailer that sells MWS parts overseas. Since I have it here, the barrel that I have in mine is a Da Vinci 6.05. In my testing, I've found that 6.05 barrels usually have the best range and accuracy of all the barrels that I've tried, and I've tried 600, 601, 602, 603, and 605s, and 605 has consistently been the most accurate and had the best range, so that's what I'm sticking with. Even with my other stuff, I'm going to end up putting 605 barrels in there. My Kythera just got a 605, and I just ordered a 605 for my Vector, and the rest of my stuff will end up getting 605 barrels along the way as I'm able to replace them. So definitely recommend a 605 barrel over a tight bore. I personally haven't seen the advantage. I'm sure there's someone somewhere more knowledgeable in barrels and barrel tightness and all that stuff who's done extensive tests that can tell you why one bore size is better than the other one, but in my testing, the 605 has consistently been the best, so that's what I'm sticking with. Completely slipped my mind to mention this earlier when I went over the bolt. This Archwick bolt will not work with the standard MWS trigger box. I did try it. My friend brought his over. I put it in his. It didn't work. I already had the trigger box out of mine. To be honest, I've already installed this in the Archwick. I've already installed it in my lower several times before, and I've taken it apart several times just to showcase it to other people. But I have tried this with the standard MWS trigger box, and it won't work for 2 reasons. One, as you can see here, the plate that catches the Z plate on the standard MWS trigger, bolt is significantly shorter than the one that's on the Archwick bolt. So the Archwick bolt has the full thing filled in, whereas the standard MWS bolt has this short one. And you'll notice as well that the Archwick doesn't have this little bump down here, this little hump that the Guns Modify bolt has. So because of those two things, I can say for sure that when I tested it with the standard MWS trigger box, it did not work. That being said, as I mentioned already, you can buy the bolt as a standalone, but if you don't have the Archwick trigger box, it doesn't really make sense to do so. So just do yourself a favor, and if you're interested in this, buy the set. It's $250. I know I've seen trigger boxes that are fully steel or CNC machine going for $180, $190, and full bolts, or even just the actual bolt without attachments, I've seen go for $120 plus. So $250 for both the bolt and the trigger box is, to me, a really good deal. Shipping to me from Taiwan to the US was about $65. So in total I ended up paying a little bit under $500, but that's because obviously like $250 from the bolt and the trigger, and then $80 I want to say from the hop unit, as well as the $65 from shipping. So that's where it all came in. But if you have the funds for it and you're looking for something like this, definitely recommend just buying both parts at the same time. Either way, you can't buy the trigger on its own. So if you're tight on money, it's not like you can say, well, let me buy the bolt right now and I'll buy the trigger later, because Archwick doesn't offer that. You have to buy the bolt as a standalone piece, or you have to buy the trigger, which will come with the bolt. So something to keep in mind. And before I start reassembling this and forget, like I said, this is a Guns Modify MWS. This is an older one. If you buy one now, and I don't have it here, but I had a friend earlier who was here earlier who has a newer Guns Modify, and actually I like the flex on, who has a newer Guns Modify, and I took it apart because he bought a PH Plus unit at my recommendation, and he brought it to me so I could help him install it. I didn't do the install, I just teach him how to do it since he's pretty mechanically inclined himself. But I was surprised to find that when we pulled his off, this ring here that the nozzle goes into it doesn't look like this anymore. It's like 4 pieces. So it'll be this ring, but it has a cutout right here. It has a channel, and it has 2 little prongs, if you would, that go into the channel, and then a spring that goes in the center of both prongs. And the purpose of the spring, as far as I can tell, is to, as you can probably hopefully see right there, maybe not so much, but there is a little bit of lateral play between my hop unit and this bore chamber. There's a little bit of lateral play, so I'm assuming that the new design is meant to put lateral pressure on the hop unit when it's installed to keep it centered better than the original design. So something to keep in mind if you do buy a newer MWS and you take this off to do a barrel swap, a hop unit swap, whatever, when you pull this ring out, those pieces are gonna fly out. So just something to keep in mind. Have a magnet or something ready, or just put your hand under it to catch that, because that spring is pretty long, and I'm telling you, it will fly out. It happened to me. It surprised the hell out of me. I didn't know that they had changed their design, so something to look out for if you're working on a newer MWS. As far as the outer barrel goes, there's really nothing special about it. The only difference between this Mark 18, because again, as I said, this was a Mark 18 when I bought it, the difference between the Guns Modify Mark 18 and the Tokamarui Mark 18 is that you don't need a special tool to remove the barrel nut from the Guns Modify Mark 18. The Tokamarui Mark 18 is very well known to require a special tool for whatever reason to remove that barrel nut. The Guns Modify doesn't have that problem. Also, if you want to use AEG spec handguards on the Tokamarui, you need to have a spacer that is, I don't really know what it's for. I don't use it, and I guess that kind of gives away the plot, right? You don't need that spacer for the Guns Modify. I did buy it just to be safe when I purchased my Guns Modified, only to find out that I spent the $10 for it that I didn't need to spend because you don't need it. And I have actually on this upper, I have put on the rail from that T10 and as well as the Riz 3 that's over there from my Kythera. I put both of them on this upper, so I can say for a fact that this Guns Modified upper will take AEG spec handguards with no modification required or no spacer, no special tools, anything like that. So plus an advantage there for the Guns Modified over the MWS or over the Tokamuri MWS. Alright, so I'm going to open this up and show you the internals before I tell you my thoughts on how they compare to each other. All you got to do for this is literally just remove these 4 screws. They're not on there very tight, or at least mine weren't when I got it, so I don't believe that you need to really crank them down all that much. As you can see, I'm doing this with one hand, and the reason I'm doing that is because I'm using my phone to record, because I have tried to do this video already 2 other times, and both times the lighting on, well actually the first time the angle of my GoPro was off, so I tried to show certain things that pertained to the reassembly of the Archwick Trigger, as well as the comparison on the trigger pull between both, and you couldn't see it because my angle was off. And then the second time I did it, I corrected the angle, but the lighting was absolutely terrible, so it was really dark and it was really hard to see what it was that I was talking about. So now I'm using my phone because it has a flashlight and I can get better lighting with it. But that's pretty much it. These springs, they're kind of hard to see, but those springs are under some pretty serious tension, so when you pop this open, it's going to slide down and it's going to smack you in the finger, so something to keep in mind. Just prepare for that. You could potentially save yourself the trouble by, oh, and by the way, this C-clip, this little teeny tiny C-clip comes in the box with the Archwick Trigger because you need it. Make sure you don't lose that. It goes inside this little hole right here, and what that is the retention clip for the trigger pin. It's around here somewhere. Oh geez, that's, I remember now, I put it right here. So it's a retention clip for the trigger pin. The standard MWS trigger box has it as well, however, and you can see it right there in that little hole. On the MWS, it's internal to the trigger box, and on the Archwick, it's external to the trigger box. And you can tell that by where the cutout or the groove on the trigger pins is. So this is the Archwick and this is the MWS, the Guns Modify trigger box. So make sure you don't lose this C-clip, because if you don't have this, the trigger pin will not stay in after you punch it in. Alright, and this is it. This is what is inside of the Archwick trigger box. You have here your hammer. The hammer does have a bearing inside of it, just for added smoothness, and it comes with its spring obviously. You have your trigger here obviously with its spring as well. I'm not sure what this piece is called, but there it is, and that goes with this little short heavy spring right here. And then this is your disconnector, and this is the piece, your valve knocker. This is what hits the magazine to release the gas. These 3 pins right here that are shown here, the little thin one holds the disconnector, or I'm sorry, the sear in place. Actually, I think this might be the steer, now that I think about it. I'm fairly certain this is the sear and this is the disconnector. So this little thin pin holds this piece in place. This is the top of it. This is the bottom of the trigger box, the one that has the fat pieces. The thin one is the top of the trigger box. So this little pin here goes in this upper hole right here, and then the disconnector, the disconnector slides right on, and then this spring right here goes in this slot. Pretty straightforward, nothing super fancy or crazy about that. And that's it. This fat pin goes in this hole right here. and then the trigger goes on top of that right there, like that. Pretty straightforward as well. This is going to be the last piece you install, so don't worry about it for right now. I will have to flip the camera, and because it requires both hands to do it, and since I'm holding my phone with one hand, I can't actually do that right now. This is the pin, the spring for the valve knocker. Oh Jesus, I just lost it. Oh, there it is. Come on. Notice this bent end right here. This piece goes towards the bottom, so it'll end up going like this, and the ring right here goes on this little teeny tiny post right there, and this straight edge, the straight end, goes into this oval slot on the valve knocker. The circular cutout on the bottom, that's the bottom. So the valve knocker goes right here after you put the spring in. It is a little bit hard to do with one hand. I'll try it, but if I can't get it with one hand, I'll end up having to put my phone down. And the valve knocker has these two little posts on the side, so they go in those little channels right here. There's another one on the other side as well. That's what those little posts are for. A lot of this stuff is pretty self-explanatory on where it goes when you start putting it together, so don't panic if you open this up and a spring flies out. As long as you don't lose the spring, you should be fine to put it back together. Because most of this stuff can only go in one way or in one location. So there we go, that's it. And like I said, oh dang it, my spring fell out for that piece. The bent edge goes to the bottom. This piece right here, I put the trigger in already, but this heavy spring slots right here into the trigger. Where that little dot is at. Oh geez. Spring goes there, and then this piece goes on top right here, and then this whole thing goes on the fat post. Right. This pin, this last remaining pin, is the one that keeps the hammer in place, but you'll have to put, that'll actually be the very last piece you put in, because what you'll do is you'll close this up, and then you'll slot the hammer into the box, and then you'll slide the pin in. Now for the big question, right? Is this real steel compatible? As far as I can tell, the trigger is real steel compatible. It looks like AR triggers that I've seen. It may even be compatible with LM4, KWA LM4 triggers. It looks very similar to all that stuff. The springs look the same, the sear looks the same, the trigger shape looks the same. Unfortunately, I don't have any of those aftermarket triggers on hand, so I can't say with 100% certainty that they are, but I really like the look of flat triggers, as you can see, which is why I have one in my MWS gearbox, my Guns Modify MWS trigger box. I love flat triggers, so at some point I would like to swap this out for a flat trigger, and I'm not gonna lie, if I can't do it, I will end up swapping back to my original trigger box, just because the feel of a curved trigger it doesn't feel right to me. I need a flat trigger. That's what I'm used to. That's how I've always played, and having a curved trigger feels very uncomfortable for me. So the trigger itself does seem to be real steel compatible. However, the hammer, you can see it has this little raised edge right here. Real steel hammers don't have this, so the hammer itself does not appear to be real steel compatible, unfortunately. If that's something that you wanted to swap out, it does not appear to be a part that you can do that with. There's no MWS support, aftermarket support for this type of part that I know of right now, so this pretty much has to stay in. But again, it is steel. All of these parts are steel, right? So they're gonna be durable, they're gonna be strong, they're gonna be smooth, and I don't see any reason why you would have to swap it out anyways. Now, I will mention this before I put it back together. You can see that this section right here is super shiny, while the rest of it is subdued black. That is because I polished both that piece right there on the hammer and that section right there on what I'm assuming is the sear, because those two contact each other, and I'll show it later when I reassemble it. I'll show you what I'm talking about. But those two pieces do come in contact with each other, and it felt, while it was smooth initially, to me it felt like the contact between those two pieces had a little bit more friction than I would have liked. So I ended up polishing it. I just took some Mother's aluminum polish and my Dremel and gave it a real quick polish till it was really nice and shiny, and called it a day. It definitely feels noticeably smoother, so I would recommend doing that if you feel that the system isn't smooth enough for your liking. It's not terribly difficult to do, and I do feel that it does have, if even a marginally small benefit, it does work. So I would recommend doing that. I'm gonna close this back up. Once you get to this point, make sure these springs are over this rounded section here, because these springs obviously need to be internal. And when you do that as well, make sure that when you're closing this up, the spring isn't, or the trigger isn't up like that, the way it is like that, because once you put the other half of it, if it's like this, it's gonna get stuck. It's gonna get stuck on that lip like that, as I'm showing you right now. It's gonna get stuck like that, and you're not gonna be able to pull it out. So you have to make sure that the trigger is pulled and that both of these little hooks are on their respective ledges. So on these curved ledges of the trigger box. So I'm gonna do that real quick, and then I'll be right back. All right, trigger box is closed up. So now for the last piece. This can be a little bit difficult to do, but it's not overly complicated realistically. As long as all of the prongs of the spring end up inside the trigger box, you'll be fine. Also, one time I accidentally had the spring flip over like this. Make sure that this rectangular section of the triggers on the bottom, the spring is on the bottom, and then you're literally just going to take this, and it'll catch on the spring, or I'm sorry, on the trigger at some point. So it'll catch there, and then you just take the spare pin, the last pin that's remaining, just push that in, pin drops right in, and that's it, you're done. That's the entirety of it. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. If you're doing something like this, you have the ability to take this apart and put it back together with pretty relative ease, or very minor difficulty. So I wouldn't be too concerned about it. And then the last piece here obviously is my bolt catch, and that's it. So disconnector, pull the trigger. The trigger is also really light. They made a video, Archwick made a video where they showcase how light the trigger is, and I think it was like 2 pounds, something like that. It's super light, and it feels really nice. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of the curved trigger. I like the flat triggers. Now, for the comparison between the two, right? Obviously, the internals are different. The insides of the standard MWS trigger box are a little bit more complicated. You have the Z plate on the outside. I have a BavTag Z plate on mine, but you have the Z plate on the outside, and then there's a whole bunch of craziness going on inside the trigger box. I'm sure with time I could figure out what everything does and how to adjust it to make it like the most amazingly perfect build on the planet. I just don't want to do that, to be honest. I'm too lazy. And this is much more simplified, I would say. It's got less moving parts, so less things that can fail. Simplicity is always going to be, I will always prioritize simplicity over something that's super complicated and super nice, because simplicity means that there's less things that can break, less parts that can fail, and easier to work on if and when it comes to that, right? So That's a point in favor of the Archwick Trigger box. Another point in favor of the Archwick Trigger box is that this is actually super smooth, noticeably smoother than the standard MWS trigger box. Full disclosure, I have played with a VFC V3 before, and neither of these trigger boxes are going to be that smooth. So if you're looking for the absolute smoothest cycle for your GBB possible, VFC V3 is going to be hands down what you're looking at, especially if you are a real steel enthusiast looking for that real steel compatibility, and you just don't mind spending real steel money on the game, right? VFC V3 is going to be smoother and more real steel compatible. However, this is still a step up in smoothness from the standard MWS trigger box, which again is another point in favor of the Archwick. Cons, as far as the Archwick goes, I really only have one, and that is that it has pre-travel. It's not a lot, but you can see that I can pull the trigger and it won't break right away, right? There's a little bit of pre-travel before it breaks. But that's me really just being like super nitpicky and looking for something to gripe about for this trigger system. The fact that it doesn't have a Z plate is also really nice for me. That's a plus too, which falls in line with what I mentioned earlier. But you might be a little concerned that this bolt catch may not be good enough to function without the Z plate. I have put this in my gun before, and I have put several empty mags through it. Just, you know, I charge the mag, put it in empty, and pull the trigger, make sure that it catches, release it, pull the trigger, make sure that it catches. And I've done several rounds of that, and it has caught the bolt without fail every single time. So even though it doesn't have a Z plate, it will consistently catch your bolt on an empty mag. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for the MWS, the standard MWS trigger box. There have been times where I had an empty mag and my Z plate was not catching. So another point in favor of the Archwick, that it is reliably catching the bolt when you're on empty. The only real plus I have in favor of the standard MWS trigger box is that there is zero pre-travel on this. If I start pulling on this, you can see that it doesn't move. Any movement right now is from me trying to counteract the force of pulling the trigger, but it doesn't move. It's right there. It's right up on the wall, and it's set up to break perfectly as soon as I pull the trigger. And that's really the only plus I have in favor of the standard MWS gearbox. From my perspective, I would 100% say that the Archwick trigger box is actually a step up improvement in function, smoothness, and simplicity. So overall, I would definitely recommend the Archwick trigger if you have the funds to buy it. However, if you don't, there isn't any real reason that you wouldn't be able to still have a fantastic build with the standard MWS trigger box. So really, TLDR, what it comes down to is, do you have the money to buy the system? If you do and you want it, get it. If you don't worry about it. There's only very minor benefits to having the Archwick trigger system over the standard MWS. The standard MWS is bulletproof. It is tried and true. There's a reason it hasn't changed in Lord knows how many years, but I know the Z system is fairly old. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? And that's pretty much it. That's how you take this apart. That's how you put it back together. Let me know if you have any extra questions in the comments, and I do my best to answer to everyone who replies. And I am definitely very excited to find out how this performs when I finally get a chance to take it out to the field. It won't be anytime soon, mostly because I don't enjoy playing in the cold, and because it is a gas blowback. Gas doesn't generally perform well in the cold. It is an MWS, but I'm not gonna just assume that it will be fantastic in the cold. So I'm just gonna wait till summer, or if I manage to hit an indoor before then, I'll have some gameplay footage with the new trigger box. Actually, now that I just remembered that I was talking about this earlier, so when you pull it and you go to reset it, you can see right there, you can see how the trigger or the hammer and the sear make contact, right? If you don't polish it, this is going to be really rough, and it's going to require a pretty significant amount of force to get it to reset the sear so that the trigger can hook properly again. By polishing it, you will remove some of that friction and it will be easier to cycle, as well as over time I think it'll break in and it should become smoother. This is relatively new. I have less than 100 rounds through it, so I wanted to mention that before I go because I remembered that I had brought it up earlier. But that's pretty much it. The Archwick trigger system, freaking awesome. I'm very excited to play with it, and I look forward to letting y'all know how I feel about it after I manage to do a game with it. So, thanks for watching and have a good day.